thank you as always for listening to Caleb vs. Self. On this episode, I get a chance to speak with my brother Chad. We did a podcast a couple of months ago regarding a bit more of our background, our religious upbringing, but on this episode, we tried to dive a little more into our personal philosophies and how we come to those. I talk a little bit more about mastering a given craft and how I feel like that can help shape our personal philosophies. Hopefully you find the conversation engaging, entertaining. I know that Chad said he wants to circle back on this topic in about 2 or 3 months from now, so be on the lookout for that if you like this conversation. There might be some things you might disagree with, some things you might agree with. If you do, reach out. You can hit me up via email at calebversusself@gmail.com or on Instagram at calebversusself. And as always, and once again, thank you for listening.
Incredible.
Wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks for coming on this one, Chad. I know on our last podcast we went pretty deep into our background a little bit as far as religion was concerned, as far as how we were raised. And this time around, given the fact that you've done a lot more than I actually perceived when it comes to reading about philosophies and trying to figure it out, I use that term loosely, figure it out. I wanted to kind of circle back with you and kind of catch up on if you've gotten anywhere with that exploration. I imagine that is also a loaded question because most of us go, I don't want to say nowhere, but it's extremely difficult topic to figure out. Where are you at this point with your own quote unquote life philosophy?
Well, it's because the funny thing is you can do all the extensive reading that you want, but until you can take your quote unquote philosophy or worldview and actually turn it into something that directs your day-to-day life, I mean, it's not very useful. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's so to me, like, I think that I'm pretty well settled on the things that I believe about how the world should be and how I should be. And then there's a disconnect from actually getting that to influence my day-to-day. Not all the time, but you definitely, I don't know, you get a little separated from those bigger ideas that you believe in. Like when you just are doing your day-to-day and you're just doing the shit you got to get done. I don't know, that stuff sort of gets put on the back burner, like in the back of your mind.
Well, it's because existing has to occur first, right? And when I say that, I mean like sustenance and housing and all that stuff. And that means you got to go to work and you have to go to work. All of a sudden your focus is pretty much tied up in what you're doing. And it feels like sometimes all of a sudden your life kind of gets away from you for a little bit. And I think that occurs to people way more often than any of us would like to admit. For you, is there something that you like started reading or were listening to or watched or however you consume, whatever you consume, that really tugged specifically at some specific thing within your own kind of personal philosophy that again really drove something home for you? Or is it just an amalgamation of all the stuff you've tried to consume and piece together slowly but surely?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a consequence of being alive, I suppose. You know, it's funny. It's when you come close, when you brush a little bit with like either bad health for yourself or bad health for other people or even people around you dying. That's always a time where you're just like, okay, what the fuck am I here for? What am I doing? Like, to me, that's typically what triggers me to like try and look a bit more inward and take things a bit more seriously.
So the act of living itself kind of breeds whatever that philosophy ends up being, you feel like?
I suppose the act of dying.
That's fair. That's
which is horribly morbid in a way, but
there's a lot of philosophers that take that perspective that death is a huge part of trying to understand yourself because we're all trying to race the clock in some way.
Right, yeah. And we're all trying to, well, because you can either, I feel like, like you said earlier, you tend to go into these little zones sometimes where you're kind of on autopilot for like, say, a few weeks or a month. And then you kind of just come back to this idea of like, okay, what am what am I doing here? What am I here for? What am I trying to get done? What do I believe about the world? What am I trying to do for myself? You know? But autopilot is just one of those things where you're kind of just used to the day to day. You know the things you need to get done, and you kind of just sort of float on through, you know? Does that make sense?
It does, and it's scary. Putting yourself on
Yeah.
autopilot for me is the scariest thing that you could mention, I feel like.
Mm.
Because one day I'm going to wake up and look in the mirror and I'm going to be old and close to death. And I'm going to ask myself, as a natural progression of my life, I feel like when you get towards the end, and I don't know this for sure, but I feel like for me, when I get towards the end, the thing I'm going to focus on is, well, what did I do? What was
Hmm.
I able to accomplish? What can I reflect upon that allows me to feel comfortable to then go into the night, right? Go into the void,
Right.
whatever that may be.
Walk off into the woods and just disappear.
I mean, in a perfect world, that's exactly what I would do. I will say goodbye to my loved ones and I'll just go out into the woods. And
You're gonna
when
be
I
like
die,
43.
as Neil deGrasse Tyson says, I will allow the flora and the fauna to feast upon me as I have feasted upon them.
That's correct. It's all cyclical. It's all cyclical. But yeah, it's just tough too, because when you do want to take things seriously, you can either refer yourself to a worldview which sort of sets up the rules for you and the expectations and how things are supposed to be. Or if you try and forge it on your own, you have to build like a structure for yourself, right? And that's not an easy task to do.
No, but I feel like today a lot of people start with their base, right? Their base religion, if you will, is what it feels like a lot of people do. And then from
Mm,
there, they then interpret what they need to in any given moment to whether justify or forgive maybe their own actions in some way, shape, or
mm,
form. That's what it feels like today most people do. And I guess for me, the one thing that I always enjoy talking to you about is that although you understand and reflect upon the base that we were raised upon, you don't then just hold to it blindly and continue on whatever path is just kind of naturally set in front of you.
mm.
I feel like you tend to challenge your own preconceived notions at such a level that allows you to continue to consume and do your best to understand what it's all meaning or what it's for.
Right,
That's something that,
right.
at least for me, I've admired about you, and I've tried to learn in some way of how to just take a moment to reflect. Like I remember specifically, and this might be going too deep for you. Just tell me if it is. But
Go for it.
after Grandma passed,
Mm.
and you're out in our uncle's backyard just staring at the stars,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I was like, I'll give Chad his space. But Alex went over and had a very thoughtful and deep conversation with you, and she
She
told me a
did.
little bit about it. She didn't really divulge a whole lot because I even said that I was like, I feel like that's something between you and him. That was obviously a pretty important conversation for both of you. But she made it feel like you were just taking in that moment and just trying to think about it. And I don't know any other way to describe it.
No, yeah. I mean that is exactly what it is. It's funny because I think yeah, I saw your daughter out there, and she was sort of gazing up. So I went over and I talked to her, and then she left. She like walked away, and then I was just stood there doing what she had been doing minutes prior. But yeah, it's again, it's definitely moments, those big moments that hit a little close to home that you try and get the whole scope of it, and it's I don't know, it's again, it's until you can take that worldview and actualize it in your day to day, and you can take that worldview and have it help guide you through those moments of tragedy. Um, the worldview is not much use to you, you
That
know?
seems to be the impetus for most people. Like when they make that conversion from child to adulthood or young adulthood, tends to be, I feel like, the destruction of your, you know, kind of notion of what you are as a kid, if that makes sense. So, like, for example, somebody might be a kid all the way up until they're 18 and then they lose a grandparent. And then they start having to
Mm.
think about and realize that the world that they live in isn't what they thought it was. And sometimes that can happen as young as, unfortunately, super young, where, someone may
Oh
be
yeah.
subjected to certain types of abuse. Your whole world changes in that very moment. And no
Sure.
matter when it happens, and I feel like it continues to happen as time goes on and you continue to work towards trying to figure out what everything means for you as a person. But are you ever able to actually truly sit there and fully come to a realization of what your life means or how you're supposed to spend it?
Well, there's a few people that managed it.
Allegedly.
Certain people who are enlightened by something divine. Um,
Allegedly.
allegedly. Hey, listen, if you, it's funny because I've had this conversation with a buddy of mine who's not religious, and there's something that stuck with me, and I don't know if we talked about this last time, but I'm going to say it again anyways. If we did, I apologize, but that's like, to me, this is where I'm coming around to. Um, so if somebody is, let's say, a Christian, and they believe that the soul is sustained after they die. They believe that there's a certain moral code they need to follow to get into heaven, that they will get to heaven if they're a good person, if they confess their sins. When that person, let's assume for a second that it's not true, right? When that person passes, when they die, it will never have not been true for them. There'll never be a moment where they realize that that thing, that moral code they were abiding by, the whole worldview that they were buying into, that they were following, there's never a moment where they're like, oh, well, that was wrong. It's never not true for them, right?
Mhm.
Assuming that nothing happens after you
Right.
die, right? Assuming that none of the religions are correct. It's never not true for them. But for the entirety of their buying in or believing in that system, it was compelling them to do things in their life, right? And then they die, and then it was never not true for them. So practically, in a sense, it was true for them, if that makes sense.
No, it
Do you see
does.
what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
I'm explaining this terribly.
No, I don't think so at all. I think ultimately what you're trying to say is that if in fact nothing happens, you actually don't know that nothing happens.
And you
Which
still got
therefore your entirety of life that you believed it to be true is still true to you because you
and
don't know any different.
you still reap the benefits that it provided you when you were a part of that system. You get what I mean? Like
Yes.
they have comfort when somebody close to them dies, knowing they're going to see them again. And when they themselves die, they don't find that out to not be true. But in the time they were going through that tragedy, they had that comfort by their side, and then it was never not true for them.
So by that argument, if in fact you just believe it to be true, you will always know it to be true.
It in a Yeah, in a sense, yeah. And it's an
So by
idea that
that
I've
logic, should we just believe?
we should believe in something and wholeheartedly believe it, I think. Because it does. It's and it's hard when, like, for me, I'm now irreligious, and I don't think that that's a corner I could ever go back around,
Mm-hmm.
um without sounding like too arrogant. It's a sort of Pandora's box. You don't put everything back in. Like, once that's been opened, at least in my particular case, there's no way I could ever go back and be a sincere believer. There's just no
Mm-hmm.
way. But I do recognize the value of that wholehearted, like, belief in that thing. Right? There's it's a guiding principle. Like, for when you meet people who are very strong in their faith, it really does influence their every single day. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There is never too long that goes by before they remember the thing that they believe in and the thing that they're here for. I'm talking about, like, strong believers. There's plenty
Yeah.
of people who claim to be believers and they only think about it on Sunday, and they only think about it, when something tragic happens. But
Or
there are
Easter's.
people,
Oh, sorry.
right? Yeah, Easter's, holidays. But there are people who truly are, like, fully involved with that belief system, and it truly does influence and guide them daily, multiple times. And I think that's a very powerful thing. I just need to figure out a way to do that secularly, which is my problem.
Yeah. To be able to. Well, how much of that just comes down to community? And I know you and I have had this conversation before, but developing a community of people around you or with you so that when you do go through hard times, you can find solace in the fact that you do have friendships or
Hmm.
even mentors who can help guide you a little bit through said process. That's where I feel like religion has quite a leg up on being, right, a secular or atheist or what have you. There is
Hmm.
to a lot of people there is no comfort that there is
Right.
nothing at the end. And
Right.
but
And
having that community of people to be able to support you, because at least scientifically at the end of the day, right, grieving and so on and so forth, is certain chemicals in the brain that are triggered and activated, right? But
sure.
you can also have the opposite balancing chemicals be triggered by friendships, by, right, like you said, like grieving appropriately, whatever that may mean to you.
Mm.
So doing that in a secular way, though, I mean, that's the part that's so difficult.
I think there's a reverence. Like there's something about this idea of divinity that gives, when you're truly in it, when you're truly believing in it, it's a powerful thing. And I definitely could say that from experience as a kid. Like those moments where which by the way, and I think I said this last time too, but probably about 30 times I got saved when I was a kid, because I would always like do something and then I would, Lord, come into my heart and please wash away my, because you're feeling guilty about whatever for that day.
I mean, I shouldn't laugh about that, but that unique experience when you open Pandora's box and you kind of recognize what it was as a kid is
Yeah,
comical. It's funny.
being outside of it, yeah, it is a little bit. Until you realize they were telling you in like the youth classes that hell was like putting your hand on the stove, but all around your body and for eternity. And you're just like, oh, this is a little intense for me, man. I'm just trying to go watch some football. Uh, but yeah, when you're truly in it, I don't know. There's something about that idea of like divinity that just seems. It's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. So have you seen Cosmos? The
Yes.
original one, Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson, either one.
Yeah.
To me, that is an attempt at creating a secular divinity, like this bigger idea of a thing we all belong to, this bigger idea of like what we're here for. It's like trying to create like a, a narrative and a set of stories and something for us to aspire towards, but in a secular way. That's kind of how I see Cosmos now.
Really?
Does that make sense?
I mean,
Yeah,
what
because
is
it's
it
like
that at the end of it that we are aspiring to?
go to the stars, multiply and prosper, conquer the
Okay. So just
galaxy,
literally become,
celebrate science,
just to become
celebrate life.
the cockroaches of the universe? Is that what our predetermined?
Well, framing is important, sure.
Oh, sorry. Because that's what it sounds like to me.
But it just it seems like an attempt at creating the secular and the scientific as some sort of like divine thing that we can participate in and be a part of. I don't know.
Yeah.
I gotta flesh that idea out more. I've not thought about it too much, but
I feel like you're on a certain path, because when I go and you loaned me the Sam Harris free will thing, and then I listened to a
mm,
little bit more on one of his podcasts, the idea that free will doesn't exist also is
mm,
like, I know that he can wrap his head around it, but in the way that he does, it's extremely uh it's non-motivating. It's like, oh well, fuck it. If it doesn't matter, then if I don't have free will, then I can't control the fact that I'm going to eat a freaking Crunchwrap Supreme. Hey, you know what I mean? Like
I didn't
it's a
have any choice
scary,
but to download that Taco Bell app. That was not my choice. No,
right?
I
So I
completely
feel like
am
on
with
one
you.
end you have this like extreme divine purpose to serve an ultimate creator, and then on the other hand, it's like, doesn't matter. And we as humans, I feel like it's unhealthy to be extreme on one side and extreme on the other. We do need to develop some
Yeah.
sense of purpose, some sense of
Hmm.
meaning. And that's where I feel like in this conversation, when you talk about how you develop your life philosophy, like that is the challenge of most people, or at least most
Hmm.
people that are cognitively aware that something needs to happen. Otherwise, either
Hmm.
it's all for just this ultimate creator and just kind of like, okay, I'll just be a good person just because I'm scared of something, or it all means nothing and therefore why am I doing it? Like there's this crazy
Yeah.
balance that has to occur.
Yeah.
And for you, being someone who is now, irreligious or non-religious, I forgot how you phrased it, but someone who has opened that Pandora's box, how do you then try to cultivate a purpose or a meaning for yourself?
Yeah, when I figure that out, I'll certainly let you know.
Hey, that's fair. That's
No,
completely
but
fair.
there are ways of doing it. It's just it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of being very conscientious about a lot of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. Because again, I almost wish I could be the type of person that could work hard, enjoy myself, do whatever I need to do to get done, and then that's it. Like I'll just pass away, and that I'll be done. But there's definitely something that always brings me back to that idea of just doing something sort of, I don't know, greater than myself, or doing something that's profound, or doing something that's important. Um, and I just can't kick that. Like I wish I could just be, a gluttonous slob and feel no guilt about it, and then just die. Like that would be
Just
great
become
if I wasn't
indifferent.
worried about it. Right, but I have the worst of both worlds because I'm a gluttonous slob and I hate myself for it. You know what I mean? Obviously, I'm exaggerating a bit, but you get what I mean. Um, and
So,
yeah,
for
go ahead.
your experiences at this point, have you found anything that you feel like might give you some sense of purpose? Like, I know for both of us, we've been in and out of college. Like, that shit sucks. I mean, I shouldn't say there's no
Sure.
purpose, but it feels like there's no purpose,
It
right?
depends on what you're doing,
The
but
end goal
understood.
there
Yeah.
is to, right, get a career to earn money so you can do
Right.
nothing. Like, that's,
Right.
or
Right.
quote unquote, enjoy life. But how does one enjoy life after, years of doing a career? I see in a lot of ways people today, in today's age, they take on a certain level of purpose and meaning through their work, which is scary as hell as well. Because look, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, your job does not care about you. Let me remind you one more time, they don't give a shit. The one thing I heard from one of my old managers that has always stuck in the back of my head is your job will be posted before your obituary. Just remember that.
Jeez. That's such a good line though.
It's
And
true.
it is, I would say it's yeah, it's largely true. It's not always true, but it is largely true because there are jobs out there where people, like, say you I don't know, you're a park ranger and you love nature. Like
Mhm.
that's somebody that might actually love and find meaning and purpose in what they do. But it does get a little
How many park
watered down.
rangers do we need, Chad?
Not that many. Oh, we got a lot of parks in this country. Come on
We
now.
do,
Thank you.
and I don't
Shout
want
out
to
to
poo
Teddy
poo
Roosevelt.
a specific occupation, but the truth is that 98% of us are not going to be able to
Right.
genuinely fulfill a sense of
Hmm.
meaning and purpose through our work. It's just in a
Yeah.
capitalist society, we can't do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, if we get to a point where you want to phase jobs out, everything about what we would expect from society would change. Would have to. But
I
this
would.
is why the smartphones kill me, and I see it in myself all the time because it's just such an easy vice to just divide your attention away from perhaps things you should be thinking about, taking a little more seriously. I'm not saying all vices and distractions are bad. You need those in your life, but with the way that they're designed now, I don't know how much you know about TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but as far as I understand, it's they fine tune it so much because on their end, all they see is engagement levels and all these different things that they can tweak and mess and play with. And they just see the engagement levels go up and up. And it's just drawing people in to just mindlessly numb themselves out and scroll from anything else that maybe they should be using their thinking time for. Like boredom can be a good thing, I think, especially thinking about bigger ideas.
Yeah, I mean,
So
what did you do as a kid when you were bored?
some Mortal Kombat, some
Okay, that's fair. I feel
Spyro.
like for me, I'm a little older than you. We had to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It
you had to
was not.
go.
It was definitely not as much as kids today. My God, it's so easy to hand a kid a tablet, and it really does keep them busy. But it's like, what's the trade off? Because there's got to be a trade off. You
Yeah,
know, it's tough. I don't know.
that's scary.
It is scary.
But
It is
yeah.
scary. Again, it's not
So
all
what?
bad. I'm not saying it's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
bad, but I'm saying when that's
So let
all
me
you
go
want
back.
to do. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me go back and say, in a perfect world, right? You have
Hmm.
complete control over yourself and your vices. What is it that we should be thinking about at least from your perspective, in order to either A, develop a philosophy, a life philosophy, or B, continue to challenge your preconceived notions of what you think your life philosophy is?
Well, that's going to differ for everybody, but I think at a minimum, just finding some level of fulfillment that's gratifying enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you will at some point get towards the end of your life, and you will reflect a little bit, at a minimum, and wonder what it was that you were spending all your time doing.
Yeah. I just did a podcast with Dennis over on his channel, Project Creator. In that one, I remember the other day specifically talking about. Well, maybe I didn't. Now I can't remember. Either way, mastering your craft. And I feel like for a lot of people, having a particular hobby or a particular, thing that they aspire to do that is not connected to financial success or, your life, your livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for a lot of people that allows them to slowly but surely start figuring out that life philosophy. I mean, you hear it, I feel like, throughout all sorts of different ones, but I'll go to the basic like Christian religion. Jesus was a carpenter. Perfecting that craft allows you to connect certain things in your mind about connecting pieces of wood together and what it ultimately means for the table that you just built. Or,
Mm.
Things of that nature. So whether you're into, like me at this point, I just like talking to people, or whether it's, building Lego sets, or whether it's producing art, or
Mm.
whether it's exercising, maybe bodybuilding is your thing.
Yeah.
Through that hobby and through that craft, as you slowly but surely start to master each element of that craft, I feel like that allows you to answer the questions that may be harder to answer if you just sat in a room and thought about it for hours upon hours on end, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, because in a way you have to problem solve when you're just figuring out how to do this thing that you're trying to do.
Well, you also have to ask yourself the question, right? Why is it that I am bodybuilding? I'm just going to use bodybuilding. Why am I lifting all of this weight? Right? You have to answer that question in order for you to keep going to the gym.
Right.
And ultimately,
yeah.
it gives you a framework, I feel like, of trying to answer the ultimate question, which is, what is your life worth? What are you doing? Where do you find purpose and meaning? And for some people, it's as simple as just trying to be able to, bench 500 pounds. But in order to do that, you then have to acquire discipline, and you have to have motivation, and you have to understand how and the why, and you've got to be technical about it. You have to figure out what types of exercises will get you to this particular, thing. And I wonder how much of us today are, hopefully through COVID, picking up new hobbies and starting to slowly learn a given craft so that eventually you could hopefully answer those questions yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Because when you intentionally spend a lot of your time trying to do one thing and figure it out, rather than splitting your attention all the time doing whatever it is that's maybe suits your interest at that moment. Because, for example, with bodybuilding, it is a lot of work. There's going to be a lot of discomfort. You're going to fucking hate it some days.
That's right.
But you truly find out a lot by just figuring out a way to push through it, be sincere about it, not get cynical, stay true to what you're trying to do. Like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, this is why it kills me that capitalism has been so successful in a way, because we have so many vices to just choose from. And all of that, some of them are just at your fucking fingertips. Does not take much. I could Grubhub whatever I wanted in my door right now.
Sure.
Or I could go out and I could run a mile and decide to do that every single day for the next 10 years. Like, there's clearly an easier decision to make there. And it's going to be somebody knocking on my door in 20 minutes with some bacon cheeseburgers. You know what I mean? So it's just, there's so many easier options that are short term, more gratifying. But figuring out a way to tune that noise out and commit to something and doing it, that's obviously more gratifying in the long run, and you're going to learn a hell of a lot more about yourself and the world by doing it, for sure.
I also think that when you're going through that type of process, there's that part of your brain that's like, here's dopamine, you're being rewarded for accomplishing this task. And you're right, it's easier to get that from a cheesy gordita crunch than it is from running 3 miles, but
Right.
if you could train your brain somehow to connect huge positive responses towards accomplishing a given goal, if you could somehow retrain your brain to do that, I feel like there might be an avenue for you then to pursue that craft at such a level
Hmm.
that, like, in some of these people, I'll go back to carpenters, for example, or even bodybuilders. Again, you get to a point to where the difference between the number one ranked bodybuilder in the world and the number two ranked body is so small, right? But the gap from me to me
Right.
being able to bench 300 pounds is so huge. But as you're going through those, you get to really dial in a very specific thing. And whatever
Mm.
that thing is, and I feel like that ultimately can impact your philosophy of life. So I guess what I'm trying to say is get a fucking hobby, everybody. Figure
Not
it
only
out.
that, but be sincere about it.
Yes,
Don't get
that's true.
cynical. Because like it's easy
But
to get a hobby, but it's a lot harder to stick it out. You know what I
right,
mean?
but that's part of the lesson, isn't it? Like the
Yeah.
first lesson here is hey, guess what? You thought you liked this? Psych. It's hard as fuck. That's the
my
first lesson.
my roommate right now, like maybe a month and a half ago, picked up a harp, rented a harp, I should say, scheduled some lessons with a teacher, and was like, you know what? Like I'm doing this. And then he's finding out very quickly that it's a hell of a lot of work. It's a hell of a lot of sitting down and intentionally getting frustrated over and over again trying to figure something out. And it's a
But
lot easier to just walk away from those things.
it is,
It
but if you
really
can break
is.
that wall, if you
Right.
can get through that first obstacle, which to your point is realizing how hard something is and being cynical about it, because, like, at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, every day that you wake up for work and go to that receptionist desk or go to that cubicle or
Oh,
go, scooping dirt or whatever the case may be, is actually just as hard. It's hard.
right.
It's hard to
Right.
do that.
But your rent's on the line in that case.
Right. There's a different connection there, right? So
There's an inherent motivation.
if you can find a
Yeah.
way to create that motivation, that positive feedback loop in your brain that connects the hey, good job piece to the hey, this is hard piece,
Mm-hmm.
you might ultimately be significantly more successful in any endeavor that you encounter. And ultimately, you'll be able to begin to form those philosophies based on those experiences.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
even for
absolutely.
me right now, reaching out to random people across the world and getting denied hundreds of times, you know?
Oh, sounds like high school for me.
All right, that's a different type
Sorry.
of thing, but
Denial is denial, sir.
but my point
um,
is that that's a lesson I had to learn. I stopped doing podcasts for like 4 weeks there. I was
yeah,
so frustrated. I was so
yeah,
pissed off about it.
yeah.
And then I just had to turn it back on and say, okay, we're doing this. I got to make the commitment. I have to realize that
Hmm.
1 in every 10 emails I send, I'm not going to get a response. And in one of those 10 emails, they're going to say no. And eventually I'm going to get someone that says, yeah, sure, I'll talk to you. And you've got to break through that barrier.
Yeah,
And what I'm learning about myself right now is that I've got to find better ways to be disciplined about how I approach certain things.
yeah. And framing what the incentive is huge as well, because I definitely see a lot of. I'm on YouTube a lot, and I've been on YouTube for since I was a teenager, so a decade now, well over a decade now,
OG
actually.
U2, huh?
OG
I'm the juggernaut,
YouTube.
man. Oh, sorry.
But it's funny to see the content that was on YouTube in the early, like mid 2000s, and the
Mm-hmm.
content that's on there now, because you can see that the incentive is for views and, more importantly, money. And you
Mm-hmm.
can see, I literally see content creators evolve out of content they enjoy doing towards content that they probably fucking hate or they're over, but
Mm-hmm.
it's what gives them the attention and it's what gives them the money. Um, so it's weird. Like you have to be honest about where your incentives lay, because you might bastardize the whole thing if you're not honest about what the end goal is supposed to be. Like what do you want to get out of this? Would you say is
For
just
me, it's
having
to be
interesting conversations?
yes, and ultimately on top of that, and we talked about this before we started recording, but to
Hmm.
have those experiences as well. I'd love to
Yeah.
be able to talk to somebody and then get to meet them in person and watch them do what they do in
Right.
person as well, or maybe even participate in whatever that thing is, so I can gain some wild experience, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Yeah.
exposing myself to more and more, hopefully as time goes on, more unique individuals, I'll be able to then start kind of crafting my own thought process. I can start pitching some ideas to people as well. You
Sure.
were talking about the whole YouTube thing. I just talked to a guy, Alex Rudd, who's fantastic. He's got a bass fishing channel.
Okay.
He's only got like 40,000 or 50,000 subscribers or something like that. So like all the people that he started with, they've got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And he
Mm,
talked briefly about that, and he's like, look, the difference is that they took the bait. Let me craft let me craft the things that work better in the algorithm, or let me
yeah.
craft the things that work better for a sponsor. And then as the years go on, 4 or 5 years into this, the people that took the bait now, when he talks to them, they're not really happy necessarily. Like they're
Right.
doing the thing that they have to do for the views or for the.
It's not. It's the sincerity left. The
Yes, it's
sincerity is
gone.
gone
It's
now.
disappeared.
Yep.
Whereas for
And
him, he's like, nah, I'm going to keep doing what I do. He's
right.
finding that success, but he hasn't lost that sense of authenticity and his ultimate goal. So
Yeah.
he's way more happier just
Yeah.
making the content because that's what he likes to make.
It's hard, man. It's
It
hard.
is.
Because again, at the same time, if you want to make something like that self-sustaining and you don't want to work a full-time job and do it on the side, you do kind of have to appease your crowd a little bit. You do got to make the money at the end of the day. I think that's a really good point you made with like you get up every single day and you go to a job and you do shit that's just as hard as it would be to try and do your hobby outside of work. But that's the motivation, the incentive is there. You have to pay rent. You have to put food on your plate. You have to feed your kids.
Well, okay, so let me change that then, right? Because let's
No,
change it
I
from
thought that was a really good
incentive.
point.
Well, no, but you're using a specific word, incentive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is it an incentive, or are you just kind of chain locked to your mortgage or your rent, or you know what I mean?
Well, that is an incentive, right?
Well, sure,
It's
but
not
I
a
feel like
positive one.
I guess incentives can be good or bad, but you have to really take stock of what that incentive ultimately is.
Yeah, which is it's hard to do when that's not so clear. Like if I try and take up the piano, my goal isn't going to be to make me a better person. But like if that was my goal and if I could actually visualize it and work towards doing that, maybe that is something I could do. Maybe that would be more rewarding than say learning the piano so I could do a little bit at a party and have some girl be like, "Oh, you play the piano?" And you're like, "I sure do." You know what I mean?
I
Like
hope Scotty listens to this.
what do you mean? How do you think I landed her? Come on now.
By playing the piano? Yeah, I
The
doubt it.
first, 5 chords of all of what is it?
I'm-
All of you?
I'm
John Legend, is that the one?
I'm pretty sure that came from you serving up those cheesy fries at Friendly's.
Whoa, too real, dude. Don't dox me.
Sorry.
But yeah, you have to be honest about what those incentives are. You have to be able to visualize those incentives. You have to be able to define your worldview and see if it fits into what it is you're ultimately trying to do. Like it's really hard. You have to be really self-conscientious about it. And you have to and I feel like it's why people get certain tattoos on themselves because it's like a permanent reminder to some part of them that they want to remember, that they want to always go after. You know what I mean? It's like immortalized on their body. It's a constant reminder. It's always there of like something they are trying to do. I mean, I don't want to give too many. I mean, there's also plenty of tattoos out there that people just get tattoos to get tattoos, but you know what I mean?
I feel like that's a direct shot.
Caleb, your tattoos are great. Listen, but you get what I mean, though. People get,
Sure.
significant, meaningful things on themselves, and it's probably some thought process there as they want to immortalize something they're trying to remember, that they're trying to keep in focus for themselves every single day.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Printed on their chest that they see in the mirror every morning. I don't know.
Or on their arm or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you, given the fact that I feel like, at least for me, I've made some progress in like thinking about my own philosophy at this point by virtue of continuing to work on my craft.
Mm-hmm.
How does somebody you feel can make that connection towards this is worth it? This is worth trying to pursue, do you think? Because I know for you, and just like most people, we come in and out. There are waves, right? Of like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
going to read all this stuff right
absolutely.
now, and then you do nothing with it for a couple of months, and then you read a whole bunch of stuff, or you watch a specific movie or whatever, and then there's nothing. You know what I mean? Like, how
Yes.
for you do you think people can manage that wave a little bit better?
God bless. Again, when I figure it out, I'll let you know. But yeah, it does come in. That's exactly how it is for me. It comes in waves, and I hate it because like the things I'm trying to do require long-term commitment. They require long-term keeping focus on the things you're trying to stay focused on. So, um, I don't know. It's about like being able to visualize what it is you're ultimately trying to do is helpful, but that doesn't keep you from going into those waves.
Do you think
I don't know.
it's figuring out a community? Because the other thing I'm noticing as I go through all
Community's
these,
big. Community is big.
that's the thing that I'm noticing as I go through all of these is the fact that having a sense of community or having a whole bunch of people in that given craft allows you to then continue to push on and figure out the X's and the O's as time goes on.
Sorry, my dog was sort of losing it there a little bit, so I had to mute the mic.
No worries.
But yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes it a lot easier. But you do. I think the biggest thing, if you really want to get something done, you have to be able to internalize a motivation purely for yourself. A community is huge in that regard, but ultimately, at the end of the day, what keeps you in the community is still going to be you participating. Yeah. And the community makes it way easier, absolutely. But finding that internal motivation and it being sincere and sticking, that's the key. And I'm trying to figure that out. You know, I'm trying to figure that out still.
Fair enough.
You know, and I'm getting old, Caleb. You know, time's running out. Jesus Christ.
You're
kidding, obviously, but
close to.
Yeah.
Well, either way, I appreciate your time. Thanks for talking to me about this. I know it's a little shorter than I normally run my podcast, but I feel like it's motivated me actually to keep making sure that I am setting a specific ideal as to why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I'm going to try and go about it. So thanks for letting me bug you, brother.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.